So to fill my time until I turned 21, I didn't go to Bryn Mawr. I joined the military, to my father's chagrin, as the Quaker. I still have my dog tag, which for the religion says other, because they don't have Quakers in the military. And in the military, I was an aircraft mechanic on the great big cargo planes. And I loved that. Was going to go career on that, and then they threw me out because Reagan got elected, and one of his campaign promises that he kept was he was going to clean house in the military. I was lesbian, so off I go. Right? Honorable discharge. I did tell them I would take them to court-martial if they tried anything less, and they decided not to. So off I went. But my best friend to this day was my officer in charge at the time, and he was willing to put his career on the line to fight for me. Now this tells you how far we've come since 1980. That wasn't that long ago. And yet, look, now I'm legally married to a beautiful woman. I did not think I'd ever find that, right? So anyway, going on. My father was spiritually minded, Quaker. His mother was a healer in the Quaker tradition, mind over matter, distant healing, dream traveling, all of this. He also had his master's in physics. So around our dinner table, he taught me about the Milky Way by spinning his coffee and then putting the milk in, and you could see it. And he said, that's what our galaxy looks like. So this is how I learned science. To me, it was curiosity, and he could find an answer to just about any question because he had the spiritual side. He's also a minister. I'm a minister. And he had the science side. He was also the physics teacher in my high school and head of the science department. So I grew up believing in God and spirit, praying, believing that God spoke directly to me in the Quaker tradition, which most of you are familiar with, and in physics. And I really learned the structure of the atom and how all of this worked and how the forces worked together. He would give us a glob and he would say, okay, do tests on it and tell me what that glob's made out of. And this was what we did for fun. He liked koi fish, and these are very expensive fish, and he would take them to shows and get trophies and prizes and things for having the prettiest fish. Well, then a disease broke out, and so beautiful, very expensive. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars per fish. These fish were dying because diseased fish were going in the tank with the others, right? And so for a period of time, we had dead fish in our refrigerator while he was trying to figure out what the disease was and how to stop it. This was the kind of guy my dad was. If you had a question, find the answer. Right? Live in the question as you're looking for the answer. Don't fight that, but go after the answer. My mother was all about love. And what a loving, beautiful person. So that was how I was raised. My mother was behind us saying, honey, women can do anything a man can. Don't let that stop you. So when it came time to drive a truck, she was right there with me. And they're right now divesting themselves of their stuff. And Mom gave me a pile of papers. And in it were some writings of hers about me as I was driving around, and a particular trip where she got on the truck with me and went from Los Angeles to Seattle and back. And it was really nice to read that. These were the big rigs. I drove trucks for 30 years. During that time, I went from failure truck driver, which made me really determined, right? So when I got thrown out of the military, I could have been 2 strikes and you're out almost, right? Because I struck out on trucking and then I struck out in the military. And instead I said, I really want to drive. I knew inside that I was a truck driver. And something happened, but I had to get back to what I was here to do. I was here to drive a truck. Now, all my brothers and sisters were in, like, Stanford, and I was accepted to Bryn Mawr and not going, and all of this, but I had to drive a truck. I had to. Have any of you ever felt that? Where you're compelled to do something that intellectually doesn't make much sense, but your heart won't let you do anything else. Right? And that was me with truck driving. While I was in that truck, I studied Course in Miracles on cassette. 30 years of Course in Miracles. When the CDs came out, I bought those. Right? I had the whole thing, teacher's manual, workbook, text. And I would listen, 36 cassette tapes. Right? I finally gave that set away to an institution like this. But it was like being in a meditation for 12 to 18 hours a day, because that's how long we drove. It was amazing. There were a lot of times, Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine, at that point where they're driving the pickup truck, he takes his hands off and he says, he's talking to the angels, drive my truck, and they do. That was how I felt with my truck. I felt so impositioned when I got into a city, because I had to be in my body and drive the thing, right? But from city to city, I was out there. I was meditating. And the angels were driving my truck. And we got to know each other really, really, really well. So the spiritual aspect, then when the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know, came out, I also, during that truck driving period, when I was locally driving out of a little town called Barstow, California, which is where I lived. And out popped this woman from Barstow named Byron Katie. She was my neighbor. And she was, or had been, a really nasty woman. She doesn't mind my telling the story. She agrees. Right? She was in a halfway house for mental illness when she had her awakening. She came back to Barstow, and believe me, Barstow did not know what to do with this person. Right? But some of us caught the bug, and we would just sit at her feet, and she would talk to us about reality and what is real, and where our thoughts play out in reality. Byron Katie was my first facilitator of A Course in Miracles. Blew me away, changed my life completely forever. Between that combination, there was no turning back from that. And so the work of Byron Katie is alive and working in me at all times. I still get mad, right? I get mad, and the inquiry comes up, and I just start cracking up. It's like, I really believed that thought? Right? So if you're not familiar with the work of Byron Katie, but you like Course in Miracles, I sort of feel that the work of Byron Katie takes Course in Miracles and puts it on the pavement. It's like, this is how you do that. Right? For me, that's how it works in my life. It's like you read the ideal in Course in Miracles and you get the feeling it's probably true, but how do I use it? It can get really frustrating. I've seen a lot of people almost lose their minds in there, trying to get it to work. Right? Well, when Katie came along and she just asked these questions, it was pretty infuriating for a while, because she wouldn't answer any question. All she did was ask the 4 questions. It was like, don't you know anything other than that? That was how I felt talking to her, right? I wanted a conversation, but she couldn't give it at that point in time. She's good at it now. But at that point in time, she was living those questions to the point where there was nothing else. Okay? So if you're a Course in Miracles person and you're looking to make it active in your life, I recommend the work of Byron Katie. It might not work that way for you, but it was for me. So then out comes What the Bleep Do We Know? And everyone said, oh my God, Annabelle, did you write this thing? Because I had the science over here, I had the spiritual over here. And all of a sudden, it was like I knew I was done driving a truck. I didn't have any accidents. None of that stuff, right? I had been in the cab for 27 years. At that point, I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year with my own trucking company run out of the high desert in California. I had the trucks, I had the drivers, I had the freight. I was done. It's like, oops, time to move on, something new. And off I went to Bryn Mawr to get my education. I called Bryn Mawr in 2004. They accepted me in 1977. I called them in 2004. Is that door still open? They said, come on over. And that's how I got here. All right. So I wanted to study physics at Bryn Mawr. Now, I thought that it was a Quaker institution. I got there, and it is no longer affiliated with the Quakers whatsoever. In fact, spirituality and spiritual studies are not encouraged there. So being in the physics department to me felt a little bit like dying. It just sucked the juice right out of the science, because these were hardcore academic physicists. But I was also 40-something years old. I was like 47 when I was a junior there. And they invited me into a faculty meeting. And I had been with the president of the college a number of times saying, we need to get more modern physics in here. Byron Katie was modern physics to me. That's physics. That's the science of the mind working on our physical reality, creating our life experience. That's the work of Byron Katie. That's science. They were not ready for that. All right. So anyway, I was in this meeting, and they asked how the bumblebee knew to go to the flower. These were physicists asking this question, which was a pretty progressive question for a physicist. And I said, that's probably God. Oh, you could have heard a pin drop. And somebody looked at me and called me something not nice. Really, really not nice. One of the professors, right? And I continued studying a little after that, and then the president of the college told me that she didn't think they had what I was looking for. And I said, okay, I would agree, because I was starting to get angry now. I wanted to know, if the quark spins this direction, why, and what difference does that make? What does that do to me? How does that work in my life? Why would I want to know which direction a quark is going if it has nothing to do with me? And they couldn't make that connection. They couldn't make that step into life. So time went on. I went to an independent college, studied E equals MC squared for 18 months. At an independent study program, Union Institute and University. And in that program, I studied ancient creation stories. I studied all kinds of aspects of E equals MC squared. E equals MC squared is an Einstein creation, which expresses what's called an equality between energy and matter, right? It's great. The problem is, we don't know what energy is, and we don't know what matter is. But other than that, we know that they're equivalent to each other. That's a problem. I know my thoughts will impress upon matter. So I know these guys are connected. When I was at Bryn Mawr, I got a Fulbright scholarship to study the nature of thought. Yeah, they paid me to write papers on what a thought was. And I thought that was pretty interesting, because all of my life I was also a singer. I would write my own songs. So the creative process was certainly alive in me. And one day I went into work. I'd been having a hard time with the mouse at Bryn Mawr to do this project. The mouse wasn't working on the screen. Hadn't been for weeks. It was really frustrating. And back then, you could turn the mouse over and clean the ball and all that. That was really funny. It was cleaning my mouse ball. But anyway, it didn't work. And then one day, I came in and realized the mouse pad was upside down. All I had to do was turn it over, and everything worked. And so the question came, where was that? For the last 3 weeks, where was that thought? I'd been asking for it. Where was it? And then why did I have it that morning? Was it hanging at the doorway and I bumped into it on my way in the room? Where was it? Where did it come from? Why didn't I have it 3 weeks ago? Why did I have it that day? What was different? Now thought really impresses matter in something like that, right? That's a real obvious case of thought impressing matter. Less obvious are things like long-distance healings. They're harder to document. But my father, being both a physicist and a long-distance healer, he kept notes on all of his healings, from the date of the phone call saying, please help so-and-so, to his mind treatments. When he did them, he called it a click. When he knew the healing had been received, he got a click, is what he said. And then he would let time pass, days pass. And then he would call the patient and say, okay, how did it go? He wouldn't put any thoughts into their minds. And then he'd write down their response. More often than not, they got it when he got the click. Right? Sometimes not. But then a lot of them got sick again. What is that? Well, that's thought, right? If you don't change the thought that created the illness in the first place, it's going to reappear. And this was something Byron Katie ran into. When she was brand newly into her awakening, she did spontaneous healings on people, little to big. Same thing, though. They kept getting sick again. And that was why she developed the work of Byron Katie, because she wanted something that would change the thinking. Thinking first, and then manifestation in the body. Thought and then matter. These things go together. How can we talk about physics in any intelligent way without talking about thought? There's nowhere left to go. And when you're in string theory and M theory and doing all this math, there's not much thought in there. It's memorization, and that's it. Not much thinking going on at all. So I was just reading a magazine that I loved. It was called Ode Magazine. It's now called The Intelligent Optimist. If any of you are looking for answers to some of today's upheaval, The Intelligent Optimist is a full magazine of nothing but people who are making lemonade out of the lemons. And how they're doing it, how you can help, who you can get in touch with. It's a solutions magazine. It's a wonderful thing. And they had an article on Nassim Haramein called The Power of Nothing. And I thought, well, that's really weird. And they show him with this hand and an apple hanging up above his hand with space in between. That, well, clearly Photoshop, right? But it was interesting. It was only 2 pages. I start reading this guy. And the hair on my arms goes, whoo! Right? It was like, this is truth. This is what I've been looking for forever. This is what I was searching for in my college. This is also what I was studying in the truck. Uninterrupted. For 27 years in the truck. I went ahead and drove trucks when I was, during the summer while I was going to Bryn Mawr, and that's how I got to my 30, okay? But full-time, 27 years. And it ties everything together. Everything together. Nassim starts one of his physics classes with a prayer, an invocation. Then we study physics. And he describes things in physical manners such as the field of infinite possibility. What is it? What's moving in there? Where is it? How is it organized? And all of it, yes.
Can you just backtrack? Because this is very important and I missed it.
What's that?
This man that you're talking about.
Nassim Haramein. A little bit about him. He, I believe, is a savant. At 10 years old, he started not accepting the science that he was being taught from geometry, from 10 years old, right? And started going his own way. He never went to college. He wanted to not learn what they would teach him, right? And it's like, so glad he did that. He lived in a van for 5 years with no income so that he could study the connection of all things, right? I say matter and thought, but it's all things. It's everything. It's the angelic realm. It's the Akashic record. It's everything's talked about in Course in Miracles. It's the thinking process. It's our illness. It's our health. It's all the same thing. And he was putting it all together through even sacred texts. He backs himself up with everything from the Bible to sacred geometry to any other sacred text to ancient sites like the pyramids, Machu Picchu, all of these other places, and he can point to evidence for what he's saying is true. He also has written a number of papers. I have 9 abstracts over there. I didn't print the entire paper because they're like 30 pages each. But if you read the abstract and you're interested, those are scientific papers written in scientific jargon. So if you're so inclined, Go ahead. A lot of us have friends that are so inclined, and we can't talk to them this way about this. But we can talk to them that way. That's their language. Yeah, then just take the abstract with you today, and then you can look it up online. All of this is available online. You can just print a copy out and talk with your friend about this, maybe in his language or her language. All that's required to understand this is an open, skeptical mind. Skepticism is one of the best things in the world. Skepticism keeps everybody honest, right? Blind faith is not helpful. It takes you in all different kinds of places. Healthy skepticism, open mind, asking questions, looking for answers, not trying to prove a point, right? Check how we ask our questions. Sometimes it's not to get answers. So, healthy skepticism keeps the entire scientific process going. And so I'd like to get started with something that was written by Patricia Robles. I found her online one day. I love the internet. Love it, love it, love it. So I just want to read this because I get really upset sometimes about world affairs. And this, to me, was the most concise discussion of why we're going through what we're going through. The apparent upset is caused by the large awakening currently taking place. Billions of people are reaching out to God every day right now. When someone reaches to Spirit, the light comes in and pushes everything that conflicts with it to the surface. So the bigger the upset, the more the spiritual awakening that's taking place. That's what we see. We see what's on the surface. This is the proverbial time of screaming and gnashing of teeth. So ask the I Am to flood its light into every crevasse, pushing up everything that doesn't vibrate with it. We are in really dynamic times right now. This was from a astrological point of view. We have an astrologer here of some great renown. But we're moving into a new age in astrology. And we really are. I mean, it's not kidding. It's coming. And if we resist it, we're going to get upheaval. We're going from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. Pisces is very male-oriented, law and order, da-da-da-da-da. Not a bad thing, just where we've been. We're moving into Aquarius, which is very fluid, very cooperative. Let's work together. Let's find solutions. And this is taking place whether we as humans agree with it or not. And change is painful. So it just makes sense to me, and I have to keep referring back to this because I forget so quickly. One of the things that Nassim talks about is the energy in space. Now, we've been told by the old paradigm, of course, by the way, of course, the science has to shift to go to Aquarius. We cannot live by the old science of separation and dead bodies and machines in Aquarius, because Aquarius is all about life and cooperation and connectedness. There's no way. So, of course, the science is coming through right now. And Nassim's not the only one. He's just the one that I latched onto. But there are a lot of people that are figuring this out right now. And the internet they're able to disseminate this information now in a way that could never happen before. Do you imagine where we'd be if Nikola Tesla had had an internet to share some of his discoveries? We would have been able to skip the whole last 100 years, right? From many standpoints. But we're catching up now. And so Nassim expressed that empty space was not empty at all. Course in Miracles says everything we understand is 180 degrees out of sync with reality. It's everywhere in the real science. So the old paradigm, empty space, nothing there, vacuum, right? They say it's a vacuum. And so nothing can happen there. Even Einstein said there had to be something out there or light couldn't move through it. Light needs a medium in which to go. So we wouldn't see stars if it were a vacuum out there. But nobody listened. They already had their minds made up. And that's a problem. When your science becomes your religion, you're done. You're done learning. So even this, bring your healthy skepticism to any of this new stuff, because that's how we move forward. When I say something that really doesn't make any sense, question me, because you might be right. I might be making stuff up, which is what my wife always tells me I'm doing. And and Byron Katie tells all of us we're always doing, so I can only agree with her. But question everything, because that's the beauty in all of it. So we have all this energy around us at all times, whether we're in the atmosphere or out of the atmosphere, does not matter. And so we're just starting, baby steps, we're just starting to get machines that can pull the energy from space. And this is one of the first ones. Now, this is called a Q beta prototype. I bought the kit online. You hear that? Oh, man. I didn't have to figure this out, right? I just had to put the money up and get it in my basement and follow the directions, right? And I look like a whiz. Look at that. Isn't that cool? And so, well, here's what it does. These black plates absorb, they are what called spontaneously ionized. Now that's science for, they charge themselves up. It's like having a 9-volt battery that you can use and run down, and then you put it on the table and it charges itself back up to 9 volts.
Is there any way to move that back so we can see what you're explaining?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So these pull energy from the air is how I interpret that. All right. These are capacitors, which are just like batteries in a way. They discharge the power differently than a battery does. That's the only difference. But they're energy storage devices in the blue thing here. So these guys pull the power, send it to the capacitors, and then when I turn this thing on, I have to start it by hand and get it rolling. The power from here unloads into this and gets it turning. You'll see a little light going. It will charge a battery. Now here is a battery. I forgot to mention that I make my living as a handywoman these days, fixing houses. And I pulled this out of a business where they had the emergency floodlights. And this was a battery from the floodlight. And it's so dead that it will not keep a charge for a second. But you can see that charge is flowing into it. And certainly if it were good enough to hold the charge, it would be charging the battery. All right, now, here comes the disclaimer. This thing is one of the first ones that was ever built. It's getting a little old, and we're learning from it how long it will last, how long these plates last, how well it will work. The sad thing is today it's flying at about half mast. It's giving me about 4.5 volts out of these capacitors, and usually it's 9. So it's going to be a real short demonstration. But I do believe it will run. And when it does, you'll see that. And then hopefully, and this is the part that really blows my mind in a beautiful way, while I'm talking for the rest of this presentation, these things will start charging that back up. And that's the missing loop in all of our power systems, is the recharging. I mean, anybody can get a battery and make something turn, but how do you get that battery charged back up? Do you use petroleum? Do you use solar? Do you use what? Well, this is completely passive. These plates are made out of graphite and silicone. There's nothing bad for the earth going on here at all. And then they have the secret sauces in between these plates. He won't tell any of us what's in there. And that's how he makes his money to continue his research. So good for him. All right, so let's see. I need some hands. Felicitas, will you give me some help here? So this is a voltmeter. You see it's at 0. Okay. And if you will hold these guys right here with your other hand. Your other hand right here? Yes. Hold these.
No, sorry.
Yeah, just hold those right there and push on them that direction. Okay, so we have 4.3, all right? Now over here, this one is reading this battery, okay, and it's 1.09. All right. When I turn this on, this one's going to go down, and this one's going to go up. All right, and you'll see lights and little things going on here. So, put these together, and we'll cross our fingers. Because this is a one of a kind at this point. Okay, so it's starting and it's running. All right, we have 2.95 over here, 4.29, 28, 27. See, it's going down. 2.95. This is really slow for this machine. It's usually whizzing away at this point, but these guys are getting old. But there it is. It's running. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off now, and we're going to watch and see if hopefully this number at 4.16, remember that, 4.16 is where I stopped it. And we're going to check this again at the end of my talk. And if you have 4.16 written down, we're going to compare that with this number at the end of the talk. I'm sorry that was so short, but we're just limping right now. I think we need new plates or new secret sauce or something here. Yes, David. Oh, good. Okay, yeah, and we'll hang on to this. This battery, like I said, is deader than a doornail. Okay, now it's going down, yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Felicitas.
It just seems like, did the charged battery, could you just transfer the charged to the uncharged battery?
Absolutely. Now, what you can do with this, and this is how, you've heard of over-unity machines? You're right on it. Oh, okay. People are working on over-unity machines successfully now. And what they do... Oh, okay. Over-unity. So in science, unity is you put 1 unit of energy in, you get 1 unit of energy out. That's unity. All right? And that's never been able to work with petroleum or electricity of any kind. Okay? Over-unity... So what we usually have, like our cars, they're about, if you put, it takes 30 units in to get 1 unit out. They're really bad, right? Your high efficiency stuff is about 2 units in to get 1 unit out. But that's not cars and things. That's super high efficient, the best that we've been able to do pretty much. Until now. All right? So now, if we've got power coming in from the space outside, we're generating, it's turning into power here. This can charge, say, this battery, and the battery can work something, right? I don't know, a hairdryer. I don't know, flashlight, whatever. If these are working properly, and I had more of them, I don't have enough of them. You have to upscale, right? On a real working model, you'd have probably 20 instead of 6 of these plates. You would be able to keep this thing going forever. And so you would say 1 unit in, ideally you get maybe 2 units out. That's an over-unity machine. And you use one of those units to feed back in to the machine to keep it going. And you use one of those units to do work over here. And that's where we're going with this, okay? And it's all about money for me. I don't have enough money to get the one with the 20 plates. The plates are about $1,000 a piece. So, yeah, so it's not financially viable yet at this point. But this is only one technology, too. This is one guy in his garage for the last 40 years has been working on this, and he finally got it to work. Right? Just in time for the internet. Isn't that coincidental? All right? So we buy these machines, we pay him, he keeps doing his research. Right? And that's how this works. This is one technology. There are numerous other ways to tap the energy in space. And here's why. And we're not the first to... David, you've had your hand up a long time.
What does this theory refer to as? Like there's coal, there's nuclear, there's wind. What would you call this?
This is unified physics. This is unified physics. Now, I don't know... This is called spontaneous ionization. Okay, this machine is a spontaneous ionization machine.
There's a larger term that physicists use for this. I don't remember what it is.
Okay.
I'm
If anyone knows, bring it up to us at any time. I'm certainly open to that. Yeah. I call it spontaneous ionization. I found it on YouTube. I saw the YouTube this guy was doing, and he said, what would you have if you had a machine you didn't have to put anything into and you could get work out of it? And he had my attention at that line. I watched the rest of the YouTube and I bought it. So, and it works.
Is that kind of like perpetual motion?
Perpetual motion runs on the same thing. Yeah. But perpetual motion, in order to be useful, you have to get more energy out of it than you put in. Like a unity machine could be a perpetual motion machine. You just took everything that came out of it, put it back in. If it was 1 for 1, it would continue going, but there would be no benefit to it. So if you can get 2 out for 1 in, that's cool. If you can get 3 or 4 out for 1 in, that's like really cool. Because then you would be able to power a house with that or any of these other things. I did the math on my own house. In order to power my house with this, would require 125 plates. Yeah, that's a little over my budget. So I decided to use it just as a model for what can be done. But it is scalable. Like it's the volume of the plate that draws the energy into it. So if you got a stack of, say, 2 by 2 plates instead of 1 by 1s, and you stack them up 100 high, you would actually have a generator that you could run your house off of. Yeah, you just put it in your garage. And you can tell it's not very noisy. You wouldn't even know when it's on. Right? I mean, this is what's coming up in the future, and this is what we could have had if we had internet in the 1920s. Because in the 1920s is when they were working on these things really productively. And then they got shut down for whatever reasons, not going there. But we're getting it back now. We're interested again. Right? So Nassim, the theory behind this, where is this energy coming from? It's not coming from the air molecules. All right? So don't think it has anything to do with our atmosphere. Like wind, you need a windmill in an atmosphere to get anything from it. But this is coming from something much more universal. And one of the things that got Nassim going was, what's the one thing that connects everything else? What's the one thing that everything has? Space. Space. Right? 99.99999% space. Me. I don't know about you. You might be denser than I am, but, you know. Space. And space is everywhere. There isn't anything in our universe that isn't filled with space and connected to everything else through space. And this is where our science paradigms, like the laws of thermodynamics from Mr. Newton, they're really cool, right? They all start with this little phrase that our scientists these days keep ignoring, and it's called, in a closed system, those laws apply. And what they mean is, you can't invent energy. In a closed system, you can't get more energy out than you put in. That's true. Any over-unity machine appears to break that rule on the surface. It looks like you're getting more out than you're putting in. And this is where the problem is with regular physicists, is that they won't get past Newton's laws of thermodynamics. If you ever talk to a regular physicist about that, this is where you're going to bump up against very stiff resistance. But the catch is, it says in a closed system. But since we're all connected by space, there are no closed systems. You can't take space out of anything. Anything at all. If you took the space out of our universe, I love this. If you took the space out of our universe and took all of the atoms of the entire material world, all the stars, you and me, the Earth, the solar system, the Milky Way, and all the other galaxies in our entire universe, how much room would that take? How big would that blob of stuff be?
A raisin.
A sugar cube.
Oh, a sugar cube.
A sugar cube would have all of the protons and all of the material part of the world in the entire universe would fit into a sugar cube if you took the space out. This is when we just start realizing how important space is. And it's sort of like considered nothing in regular science, and this is why regular science has come to its end. It can't get any further because it's hitting space and it's saying it doesn't exist, and there you are. That's the end. So it's maybe better to say, okay, what's in this space? This space is connecting everything. It makes all systems open systems. And that changes entirely Newton's laws of thermodynamics. There is plenty of energy in the universe to come out with 2 or 3 of whatever we put in here. Believe me, the energy in this universe is over the top. Over the top. We use up twice the energy that we take in the form of food, water, and breathing. Our bodies use up more energy, more calories of energy than we take in, ever. We couldn't possibly take in enough calories to fuel what our body does. There's a little mystery. Do you think the scientists are trying to figure out why? Well, how do we make up that difference? Because when we breathe, we're breathing in this energy. I call it spirit. We are all connected in this act of breathing. You can get along without food for a long time and do really well. There are people who have fasted for months and months and months, and they're still around. You can get along without water for a long time, too. 10 days, sometimes more than that. There's actually a group of people who live on meditation. They're called breatharians. Don't know if you've ever heard of these people. They are very active. They're not just sitting there on pillows in meditation, but they have very specific meditations where they feed themselves in their meditation in an energetic manner. They then get up and go to work and do all the things that everyone else does. You would not know one if you met one. But they don't eat any food and they don't drink any water. And they can live for years and years, just like everybody else. They're consciously nourishing themselves from the space. It happens all the time. It's how life takes place. And space is the one thing that can do that. So let's talk a little bit about how much energy there is in space. All right? We're going to talk about the smallest thing in our universe. Now, there is no such thing as a smallest thing because everything is scalar, right? So you could get smaller than our universe, and then you would find smaller things there. And we might be a smallest thing in a universe larger than ours, right? But the smallest thing, we call it in unified physics with Nassim, we'll call it pixel size. All right? This is the pixel size of our universe. This is the building block of what our material world is made out of, and it's called a Planck. Once again, it was discovered in the 1920s. This is not new information. Nassim didn't go out and rewrite science. He went back and researched with an open mind. And he researched all of the greats from the 1920s when all of this stuff was popping through, probably channeled, I would imagine. But new stuff coming in, new information coming in, and then it all got shunted over into quantum physics, and it has led us to solutions that don't answer any questions, like string theory and M theory and, 14 dimensions. Who even knows what that means? I don't. We love our dimensions in the spiritual world, and there are dimensions, and we'll talk about different dimensions, but it's not created by string theory. And I was one of the really avid string theory enthusiasts, right up until I read this science. And I realized, yeah, he's right. In 30 years, string theory has never answered a single question about the physical world. And it's led us down into this endless space with no answers. So let's start again. All right, let's go back to where we did have some answers cropping up. And that's what he did. He went back to Einstein, Max Planck, Wheeler, the guy that did the geodesic dome, Buckminster Fuller, Niels Bohr, all of these people that were actually discovering things. And he synthesized that information in a different way. That's all this science is. But the result of that synthesis is beautiful. So, the Planck. How big is the Planck? All right, I can't feel Plancks. I can feel wind, but not Plancks. So let's talk about a proton to get to how big a Planck is. All right, a proton is really, really, really small. If you blew a proton up and put it on the 50-yard line, you blew it up to an orange size, and you put it on the 50-yard line of a football field, where would the electron be? Whizzing around it. Outside the stadium. Okay? Outside the stadium. That's how much space is in one atom. All right? So now the proton is made up of Plancks. All right? The pixel size. The proton is the first material thing. That's why we talk about protons. It makes the material world. All right? Quarks, I'm so sorry to say because my dog is named Quark, but quarks are not real. It's like, oh, I was really sad to let that one go. Love my quark. But if anyone wants to know, we can talk about quarks later and how they got discovered and what they actually are in unified physics. Unified physics answers all of these questions in reality, and it really paints a different picture. So we take the proton, which is made up of Plancks, named after Max Planck. He measured them back in the day, and and I love seeing the yawning, by the way. When the brain gets really fogged, it wants to clear and it yawns, and you get so much more spirit when you yawn. That's really good stuff. So if we take a grain of sand, right, we blow the Planck up to the size of a grain of sand. How big is the proton? The proton reaches from Earth, actually our sun, to Alpha Centauri. That's how small a Planck is. It is itsy bitsy, teensy weensy, teensy tiny. All right? So it's amazing that Max Planck could even detect one back in 1920, whatever, with his equipment. But he did. He got it. And he was spot on with its measurement. So if you take now, you have a proton as big as from the sun to Alpha Centauri, then you fill it up with grains of sand. That's how many Plancks are in a proton. Wow. Yeah, that's worth a wow. That's worth a wow. All right? That's a lot of Plancks. And in scientific terms, it's 10 to the 93rd. That's a 10 with 93 zeros after it. That's actually in a proton. Just one little tiny proton. All right? So energetically speaking, if we then bring the number of Plancks that are in a sugar cube, we actually have enough energy, because these Plancks, they're little oscillations. They're not material yet. They're not matter. This is energy. This is the definition of the E over here on E equals mc squared. We're starting with the E. The E is the Plancks. And they're just little squiggles. They're not material. They're not... Oh, we got some music going on. Okay. So if we take enough Plancks in a sugar cube, once again, squeezing the space out of all of this, how much energy do we have? Energy do we have? And I'll just tell you, because you would never, ever, ever guess this. We have enough energy to get her phone turned off in the first place. And then, and then we have enough energy to do the universe and a half. And a half. In a sugar cube of Planck's. Okay, Carol, can you take that outside? Okay, very good. So, yeah, in a sugar cube of Planck's, there's enough energy to build the entire physical universe. Not just galaxy, we're not just talking Milky Way. All of the whole universe that we know of. And a half. It's just mind-boggling. So when they say we don't have any energy left here on Earth, they're just looking in some pretty limited places. All right? That's all that's going on. It's a matter of perception. And once again, I go back to how do my mind thoughts impress my reality? Well, this could be a big one. If we would take our thought of energy out of the oil well and bring it to spirit, real spiritual energy. We know this stuff. In these rooms, we've been working with spiritual energy forever. And we know it's true. And then we look to the scientists and we get complete denial. And it's like, how do I put these two together? Because I live in a physical world and I've got spiritual experiences. And they want us to think we're crazy. We're not crazy. Okay, this is a living, breathing, growing world. All of it, not just Earth. All of it. And it's all propelled. Are you ready? What's holding all of this together? Everything is gravity. Einstein actually figured it out and didn't know that he had done that. But it's all in his theory of general relativity, which is the one on gravity and space-time bending and all this stuff. Now, he was pretty, he had the problem with his little thing of, well, Einstein's gravity. We're all familiar with trampolines? Yeah. Okay. So you have a trampoline and you put a bowling ball right there, right? And the trampoline goes, right? If you then take a golf ball and you run it around the rim near that bowling ball, there will be a certain place that it'll keep turning as if in orbit of the bowling ball. And it depends on speed and how far down in that hole you are and all of these other things. It has to be just perfect. But it will orbit, or it could fly back out if it's going faster or not close enough, or it could sink in to the bowling ball if it's too slow or too close. And so this is Einstein's gravity. It looks like the bowling ball has a string on the golf ball, but that's not actually what's happening. The space-time, that trampoline fabric, space-time, is bending to the point where the golf ball can't leave that cone, that vortex. Now, we're even talking about vortexes now in spiritual work, right? Very, very accurate. Because the proton in the old science is a piece of stuff. It's a thing. It's matter, right? It's hard, right? In unified physics, it's the trampoline. It is spinning Plancks. Okay, remember how many Plancks are in a proton? If you get all of those Plancks spinning in one direction together simultaneously, you wind up with this vortex, right? And one thing that Einstein forgot to think about was that space-time is three-dimensional, not two. All right, so he had this plane, and that was part of why he couldn't get to what's now called unified field theory, which we have in unified physics. This has been the holy grail of physics my entire life, has been to be able to find a set of rules that govern the very, very small stuff, the atoms and all this stuff, and the cosmos. Because Einstein was disturbed that it appeared that what he discovered meant that there was one set of rules for the little stuff and another set of rules for the big stuff. And he said that just doesn't make any sense. And so he argued against his own theory of general relativity until the day he died. The thing is, he was right. All the big stuff is actually little stuff. So the proton isn't a thing that's separate from space-time any more than the vortex in your bathtub is separate from the water. Right? When you pull the plug on your bathtub, you get a vortex, right? Is that not the water? Except for the little hole in the middle, right?
Are you basically saying that if we really joined our minds together, like that little monks that meditated together in Washington, D.C., and brought about a lowering of crime? I mean, is that kind of where you're going with all of this?
That's,
The mind is really...
well, I'm done then. Oh, well, I thought I had all this stuff to say, but, you know. All right. All right, we'll start the questions now. So Nancy said, are you saying that if we all got our minds together and thought the same thought at the same time, such as the monks did on that, I'm sure you're familiar with their experiment with Washington, D.C. crime rate? Okay, some Tibetan monks, some critical mass of Tibetan monks got together and meditated on lowering the crime rate in Washington, D.C. for a period of a week. During that week, the crime rate decreased significantly. I think it was 30% or something. I mean, it was a measurable amount. And then it went back up when they stopped meditating. So she was saying, are you saying that we could do that too? That's all that there is, Nancy. That's all that it is thought. So we're working on these Plancks that are as small as what you now know, right? How many grains of sand will fit in a sphere that goes from our sun to the nearest star. So these things are little. Our thoughts can impress on those things. And they are in space-time in a very particular pattern, all right? Because they are powerful, energetic beings. Does anyone recognize this guy? Okay? The Plancks in space-time, static, are in this pattern. This is the two-dimensional depiction of a Buckminster Fuller design of complete equilibrium. Complete equilibrium. If these were straight lines, every single angle and every single line and all this stuff would be equal. It's a 64 tetrahedron grid. And it repeats over and over and over and over and over. And the ancients knew it. The ancients had this information. We've since lost it, and now we're rediscovering it. Hi. Yeah, can you tell us who you are? Sure, absolutely. So I went to Egypt with Nassim and over 150 of my closest friends that are all graduates of his course. Right? That was the requirement. We went to the pyramids. It was unbelievable. He got permission from the Egyptian government to go to some sites that are not usually open to tourists. I saw the most incredible display of it's got to be gravity control. I mean, even more than the pyramids. But for me, the high point of what we did there, we went there with crystals, actual individually grown crystals that are all about organizing the energy in the Plancks. Organizing the Plancks, they organize the water in our bodies. We wear them as necklaces right over the heart chakra. And they organize the blood. It just gives you the right consistency of blood. It does all these things. So anyway, we had 150 of these crystals, plus we had 3 64 tetrahedron grids of these crystals, very powerful crystals. We went into the pyramids, 160 of us, in the 3 pyramids simultaneously, which is another thing that the Egyptian government doesn't allow, but they gave us special permission to do that. Overnight, on the night of the full moon in October of 2017. We were there from 4 p.m. until 4 a.m. We all took turns lying in what they call the sarcophagus in the king's chamber. That's a resonating chamber right there, folks. And we laid in that chamber with the 64 tetrahedron crystal grid on our crown chakra, our crystal on our heart, and we laid in there, and here's Nassim with his big, deep voice, right? And his assistant is on the other end of the sarcophagus resonance chamber, and they're chanting Om with another 50 people in the king's chamber chanting Om. For 12 hours, we all chanted Om in the 3 pyramids. 12 straight hours, 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. No, other way around, 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. And unbelievable things happened.